Hello, this is Tao Chen, and this is my CS355 final project. So the two API that I will be using is the GetPocket API and the AnyList API. So the endpoint for AnyList API is graphql.anylist.co. So we're going to give them a query of what we want, which is basically the year and season that the anime it came out, and we're going to get back a JSON list like this. And for GetPocket, we're going to make three requests. The first one is the request where we're going to give them the consumer key and the redirect URL. The consumer key is when you create the app like this, create a new app. Once you finish creating it, you're going to get a consumer key. And you're going to get back a request code. This will be used to redirect the user to the authentication page, which is over here. And in the authentication page, we're going to give the consumer key of our application and the code that we just got. And we're going to get back the access token and the username for the user. And the access token is what allows us to add, modify, or retrieve like on a permanent basis to their user account. And to the third request is the modify. Since we're gonna be sending multiple lists to add, it's going to be using the send instead of this add. So we're going to add an array of URLs. So in total, we're going to make 4 requests. The first two is to the GetPocket, the request URL and the authorized URL. And then we're gonna send a query to the AnyList. We don't need any authentication because this is public information. And then our fourth request is to actually adding in the URL into the user's GetPocket account. This is my sequence diagram of my application. So first, the user will go to the root of our website, which is localhost 3000, and our server will send them a form which they will fill out the year and season they want to add to their GetPocket list, and then our server will save the task. After the server saves the task, we're gonna send to GetPocket a, a request to get a token, and the GetPocket will send back a 200 OK, and it will send us the request code. We're gonna save that to be used so that we could send a 302 redirect and for the user to go to the authentication page. So when the user's browser see the 302 redirect, it immediately go to the authorized page. And the GetPocket will send to the user the permit to like for the user to grant us permission to add, modify, and retrieve the data. And the user gonna click yes, and then the GetPocket will send a login form, and the user will log in. And when user logs in, it's gonna redirect them to the localhost 3000 receive code in my case. So you could tell that this is a 3-legged authentication because the login is between the user and the GetPocket. So we don't have the user account. And once the user goes to localhost 3000 receive code, then in the server, the function get access token will be invoked. So the server will send to GetPocket a request to get the access token using the customer key and the request code. So the GetPocket API will send us a 200 OK and send the access token and the username. The username is mostly when there are multiple users. We could actually say them, but we don't have the password. So since we don't have the password, we don't actually have the user's account. And once we have the access token, we basically need to know what to add to the user's GetPocket. So we're gonna make a query into the any list. So we're gonna get from the task that we saved from before, and then input that into the query, and then the any list will send back a 200 OK with a JSON list of the anime ID and the title. But we need to parse that into an actual URL link and make it into an array so that we could send an array of URL to add to GetPocket. So we're going to send a request to add using the consumer key, the access token, and the JSON array, which will be what contains the URL. And the GetPocket is going to send us a 200 OK. And when we receive that, we're going to send a 302 redirect to GetPocket so that the user can see the list. So when the user's browser sees the 302 redirect, they will go to the GetPocket URL, and then the GetPocket will just send back the OK and the actual and their account. In the process of coding my application, I use Insomnia, the Insomnia core, not the designer, because the request is a bit confusing. So in the Insomnia, first we're gonna post the URL, right? And then in the JSON request form, it says to use post. And then it says we have to pass the consumer key and then the redirect URL, which is in the form, consumer key and redirect. And for the header, the content type is what type of form they expect to receive, because the JSON is in a JSON array, while another form is as a string. And the XSEP is what type of form we're expecting, which is kind of like an JSON or a string, like this. But by default, it's a string if you don't put the XSEP. And before I made a mistake in trying to fill in everything, which didn't get it to work. But with the help of my professor, I managed to get this working. So all you basically need is the consumer key, the redirect URL, and then the header, which is these two, or just this one. Everything else is not necessary, like what is highlighted. So this is the code for my application. So we have this consumer key and the redirect import from the credentials.json. The consumer key and the redirect URI, the variable had to match to the what's in the credential, or else it will be undefined. This is the port that we are listening in. So when the user goes into our website localhost 3000, which is the port, it's gonna send a request to us, which localhost 3000 is directly going to the root, which we're gonna get a form from HTML, the form for users, and this is what it looks like. And in the form, I actually have a condition, so to prevent any of the field left blank. So this is the code for the form. This is the year. They can only put between 1980 and 2021, or else it's not going to go like this. And when they press submit, you can't submit. And for this, because when we query for any list, the field has to be specific with the spelling. So it's better to have it left as radio. There's only 4 options, and by default this is check, the same thing, to prevent it from being blank or empty. So once the user get the form, once the user submit the form, it will go to this any list of our website. So it's gonna send another request, but with the information of the form. So it will not go to this one, but it will go to this one. It says request URL start with, which is this part here. You can see that the user input is year and this spring. So if for some reason they bypass the condition, we're gonna have a 404. If for some reason they manage to bypass, else we're gonna save the task and we're gonna get the request token. So to get the request token, if we haven't gotten the token already, then we're going to do the else. But if we already have the token, then we just have to complete the task. So for Insomnia, this is the URL, this is the method, and this is the header, and this is the form that I showed you before in Insomnia. And this token is the callback, and we have to keep on passing down the rest so that we can redirect the user, or else we won't be able to redirect. And this happens for most of the case that I have rest passed down. And so the form goes to the .end, where everything else is going to the front. So in the process, we're going to save the code in the token, and then we're going to take the user to the redirection page. And this is going to be a 302 redirect. So the redirect URL is basically with the /receive code. So when the user goes to the redirect URL, this function gonna get called immediately, which takes us to the access token. So the request is basically the same, except that the first request we had the consumer key and redirect URL. The access token request we had a consumer key and the code, which is the request token that we have before. And then we're gonna go to process 2. And this does the same thing. We're gonna push into the array the access token and the username. The username is mostly for when there's multiple users, but for our case, we don't really have to worry about this. So I kept it separate because after I finish getting the access token, I want to do the task. And then for the task, this is our query for the any list. And you can see that for the import had to be changed because we had to change it to the user's import. So once we pop the task, we don't really need it anymore. So we pop it, we don't really save it. So the request is mostly the same, and except for the authentication, we're not logging in, but we're just sending the query. So we have the query and the variable. So the reason why we have to send in the query and variable and not just the query is because we're going to replace it. As you could see, we don't actually replace it. Once we're gonna send it to the AnyList API, their server, and they're gonna want to process the replacement. We're not gonna as you can see, we didn't replace it. It's the AnyList. The server gonna be the one that's replacing it. So after they finish, we're gonna get a callback. So as you can see from before, we're going to have the data page media and an array of JSON for ID and title, but we don't need data page or media. We just need the array. So this is just to get the array. So we have the add to pocket over here. So since this is in JSON, we actually need to convert it. So we have to replace the ID and the title and then replace the space with the dash. And this is used for when we gonna send to GetPocket to add. So this action is actually to tell GetPocket what to do, because this could be used for multiple things, but we just want to specifically add. So we're gonna push everything into this URLs, and we're gonna start the adding process. So the adding is basically the same, but we have this action, which is an array of this for how many animate. Well, the array size is how many animate. And once we finish the end all, we actually don't really need this. We just need a 200 OK. And once this code end all is finished, it goes back to add to pocket, and add to pocket will finish, and it will go to back to this one, and which we'll call the done all rest, which the rest is the parameter. And then this is where it's gonna take our user back to the GetPocket homepage. So I said before that we need to keep on passing down the rest, because this is how we're gonna redirect. If I didn't pass the rest down here, then I won't be able to use it over here. And that's it for the code. And okay, now I will be running the program in order to see how it works. As you can see here, there's actually nothing in my GetPocket account. So let's start running the code. So you can see here it's listening to put 3000. So this is the root of the page, and we got a form, and we're gonna fill out the form. And then once we fill out the form, you're gonna get the request token. You're gonna go to AnyList request token. You're gonna do all this, and then go directly to this 302 redirect us to the authentication page over here. And since I already signed in, they will not send a login form. When you authorize, it may continue the rest. So authorize, and then you can see all these animates. So when I authorize, I redirect to the URL receive code, get access token, and do all this and add it in. This all happens really quickly, and you could see here that it's already added. And you could tell all these links works. And since we sent a large array of animates, there's actually a bit of lag. Like, is you could see that before we have I don't remember, but obviously this change is actually GetPocket's server that lag a bit since they're processing a large amount of information. So we could just wait a while. Well, I guess it's not even that long. So we're gonna test it working consecutive without actually closing down the server, but we should need something to actually know that we actually added something new. So for this Google, it's gonna be next to this moonlit mile, and we're gonna pick another year and season, and you could tell that it directly goes to the GetPocket. It's because when we submit the form and get the request token, this token is no longer empty, right? Because it's no longer empty, we go to the find task immediately. And the find task will query. Now the task, because it's pop, so whenever the query is finished, right, the task will always remain empty. So you don't have to worry about having like a repeated year or a repeated season. And and you could tell that this is new because of this Google and this Moonlit Mile. This is all new that's added afterward, and all these links work too. And if we were to do it a third time, you could actually see that it could actually respond to multiple imports. This Subway Joker game, and it takes a while to add them all in. So to end this on question, how could you guarantee that it happened one after the other compared to asynchronous? So we made a total of 4 requests. So the first 2 requests will happen separately for sure because they lie within a different URL. So the first request happened, and then the second request, and the third request cannot happen until the second request is actually completed for the find test. This is the third request. So another case where the third request will be used is for the get request token. But that's only when the user make another import. But if the user make another import, we could actually skip the first 2 requests. So that way it's still happening in order because we don't need the request token and access token anymore after the first time. So the fourth request only happened within the long callbacks. So the third request, right, will call back the proc, and then proc will call add to pocket, and add to pocket will call add to pocket 2, and in add to pocket 2, that's when the fourth request is used. This this way everything happen in sequence. And what what I got from the AnyList API is the anime ID and the name and the title of the anime, and that's all I'm querying against the AnyList for. So let me go to this. So for the anime title, I don't think they will actually change it because this is the actual title of the show. And the ID, well, it doesn't really matter because the the what I'm querying for is the season and year, right? And they cannot really change the year and season they actually air because it's a fact, right? So I don't think they're gonna change the year and season of when the anime is released. And I think they're gonna still keep it as label anime. So I guess the query won't really change much unless they change how they want it to be queried. And for the image you see in the GetPocket, right? I never actually upload the image. This so if the AnyList API change the image, then this will the image over here will also be changed because this is like a preview. So when the task is added, it's gonna stay added for a really long time.